Okay, so we got Moses, who was raised in this. There's no question whether or not he was raised as an Egyptian. Actually, where he was born doesn't matter so much, because where you come from matters very little compared to where you go to. And part of our reason for racism at all is because we believe there's such a thing. There's no such thing as races. There's no Jewish race. There are people who believe there are Jews, but the Jewish race is no different than any other race, because a race is just a concept. It's not a real thing. We are all one species, and we are all very, very closely related. In fact, the human race is closer related, and that's 6 billion of us, or 7 pretty soon, or maybe already. We are closer related than some tribe of apes that lives on one of the mountains somewhere in Africa. They have more gene diversity than we do. We are super close related. So let's not talk about races, because races is so retarded. There are, of course, people who are black and people who are white and people who are all the other shades in between. That has all to do with environmental conditions over several generations. And it doesn't take too many generations for a tribe of black people to go into the north and become white. It doesn't happen in a half a year, but it does happen in a 10,000, maybe even, it doesn't even matter if it takes, maybe if it takes 50,000. 50,000 years isn't very long, but it will happen. If you take a bunch of black people and move them up into the north, they will eventually fade out. And that's what happens to us. We fade out because we need the sun. And a lot of people think that Jesus Christ was more a admirer of the sun than anything, that his God was the sun. But that's straying a little bit farther as well. But it was also an Egyptian thing, that the sun was the god. And I mean, I think it's true. The sun is our god. Without the sun, we don't exist. And we would exist exactly 8 minutes if the sun went out. That's how long it would take for the reaction. But the sun's not going to go out, so that's not our problem. Our problem is trying to figure out why Moses wanted to take 600,000 soldiers on a rampage. And the first rampage he starts on is a rampage at home, and he has a problem, of course, talking to the Hebrews, because he has never learned Hebrew. He might have learned a little Hebrew from some of his slaves, but his problem would have been communication with the slaves. So that's where Arron fits in. Arron was not his brother. It might have been, he could have been a brother from rape. He could have been a half-brother. Arron could have been a half-brother, but there wasn't a whole lot of love between them. Moses, I don't think he ever really had a whole lot of love ever. He didn't have a whole lot of love given to him, and he never showed a whole lot of love. He showed a little bit of sensibleness, very, very seldom, but mostly he showed vengeance and greed, and we'll get to all that. But Arron was most likely, even if he was his brother, he wasn't a brother who was loved, and he was a Hebrew, which meant he spoke the Hebrew language, and he was obviously fluent in whichever language the Egyptians were speaking, which I'm going to have to guess was Arabic, but I could be wrong. Whatever language they were speaking, Arron knew both languages, and Moses didn't. And that is hinted at quite a few times. Arron is there because Moses can't speak very well. But Moses can speak very well in his own language, and he does the talking when they go to the pharaoh. But Arron obviously has to talk to the Israelites because Arron speaks Hebrew. And this is so obvious eventually that if you don't believe it now, don't worry about believing things. Worry about trying to understand the story. See it as a story, and you will start to understand the little hints and the little constructions that are made there for you to interpret. If a thing in a book says something that is so obviously backwards to what it might be, there's a very good chance that the exact opposite is what the truth is, and they can't simply write the truth that Moses was a child of rape from the pharaoh when the pharaoh was trying to sell this great family image. I mean, you can't say it, so you have to say the exact opposite and put it in his fairy tale so that eventually somebody who reads through this and has just a little tiny bit of curiosity, which is impossible to weed out of the human instinct. You can beat humans for thousands of years, but there will always be some human popping up with his head around thinking, well, there may be other dangers besides this fantasy danger that we've been given. Let's look around. And that's exactly what we have to do. We have to stop fearing God, this one true God. We have to stop fearing him and start fearing real things, because there are enough real things to worry about, and fearing God in heaven, it's ridiculous. It's just simply ridiculous, and we have to get over that. And I think that might be enough for today, and we'll get on to where Moses goes on chapter 3 later, or tomorrow, or the day after, okay?